The air was thick with the weight of an unseasonal fog as the final whistle blew across the field. October 15th, 2005. The last game of the season in a rural Pennsylvania town most people couldn't find on a map. The home team had just pulled off an impossible win, a comeback that would be talked about for weeks, but not for the reasons anyone expected. 5 players from the visiting team, the Dayton Valley Wolverines, left the field together, laughing, sweat still clinging to their jerseys. They never made it back to the locker room. They never made it home. Their names were Carter Hill, Jamal Ortega, Ryan Chen, Miguel Alvarez, and Travis Kane. All seniors, all varsity starters, all healthy, popular, and by all accounts thrilled about the upcoming playoffs. When they didn't return to the bus, their coach assumed they were just cooling off, maybe talking to girls, maybe even trying to stir up trouble. But by 9:30 p.m., panic began to set in. The stadium lights shut off, phones rang unanswered, and in the darkness beyond the bleachers, the woods swallowed the trail where their footprints ended. Local police launched an immediate search. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters scanned the hills with infrared. Interviews were conducted with everyone in the stadium. No one had seen them leave. No one remembered anything strange, except one boy who claimed he'd seen someone in a mask near the tree line. That statement was buried in the report. By sunrise, the town had changed. The win meant nothing. The sport meant nothing. 5 families stood at the edge of the woods, calling out names that would never be answered. Some said they ran away. Others whispered about hazing gone too far. But those closest to the team knew something else was wrong. The only clue left behind was a smudge of red paint on the locker room wall, a symbol no one recognized, an X with curved lines, almost like horns. It was the same color as the tattered hoodie one of the boys was last seen wearing. Police brushed it off as teenage graffiti. They shouldn't have. Because 19 years later, the same symbol would be found again, miles away, inside a cave, marked above 5 medals hanging from fresh sinew. And the man who found them? He never made it down the mountain. In the days that followed the boy's disappearance, Dayton Valley became a fortress of flashing lights and silence. Reporters swarmed the town. National news trucks lined the football field like vultures circling a carcass. But with every passing day, the story slipped further from their front pages, replaced by politics, war, celebrity scandal. But the families stayed. So did Detective Marla Raines, lead investigator on the case. A 17-year veteran of the state police, Raines had seen drownings, overdoses, even cult suicides. But this felt different. There was no struggle, she would later say in a private interview. No screams, no calls for help. It was like they just stepped out of the world. Search dogs picked up a partial trail near the woods north of the stadium, a narrow path known to locals as Widow's Cut. It led toward an abandoned storm drain system that hadn't been in use since the 80s. Teams followed it for nearly 2 miles before the scent abruptly vanished at a clearing filled with shattered glass and scorched grass. At the center was something no one could explain, a circle burned into the earth, 12 feet wide, perfectly symmetrical. No signs of accelerants, no lightning strikes, just ash, bone fragments too small to test, and a faint chemical scent like ozone and sulfur. Then came the second clue, the spray-painted tag. Identical to the one in the locker room, this time larger, more deliberate. The same X with curved horns, but underneath it was a word in block lettering, repaid. The town chalked it up to vandals, but Detective Raines wasn't so sure. She pulled school records, phone logs, chat room transcripts. Nothing indicated gang activity or occult ties among the missing boys. But when she interviewed the visiting team's bus driver, Gregor Kravik, things turned colder. Kravik was a recent hire, a drifter from Eastern Europe with no prior background in coaching or education. His resume was a mystery, and his paperwork listed 3 different addresses in 3 different states. When asked about the graffiti, Kravik only smiled. Is only paint. Kids always want to be remembered. 2 weeks later, Kravic left the country. He told the team he was returning home to visit his dying mother in Serbia. But Serbian immigration records showed no such person ever arrived. Kravic vanished, just like the boys. Behind closed doors, the case grew darker. Raines discovered archived footage from the stadium's CCTV system, which had been partially corrupted the night of the game. The footage cut out at 8:46 p.m., the exact time the boys were last seen. When the feed returned, the stands were empty. But just for a moment, in the corner of the frame, something moved. A tall, thin silhouette near the woods, its limbs bent wrong, its head horned. The footage was lost shortly after. Officially, the report was filed as unsolved disappearance, presumed runaway. But off the record, Detective Raines wrote 3 words in her personal case journal, words that would not be seen again until 19 years later. It took them. By early 2006, the town had gone hollow. The media moved on. The posters curled and fell off telephone poles. Parents stopped answering calls from journalists. Grief settled like sediment over Dayton Valley, but it never hardened into closure. Not with so many loose threads. The 5 boys were declared legally dead exactly 1 year later. There were no funerals, just photos in gymnasiums, faded jerseys on display, and a long, uncomfortable silence that followed any mention of the 05 season. The local high school retired the number 5, not for a single player, but for all 5 that vanished. Detective Raines transferred to a desk job in Harrisburg. She said the case had gotten too close. She didn't speak publicly again, not until 2024. But not everyone let it go. One parent, Julio Alvarez, Miguel's father, continued to investigate on his own. He claimed he'd received anonymous letters in the years following the disappearance. Each envelope contained a small item, a cleat, a torn piece of a jersey, a blood-stained whistle. Local police dismissed them as cruel hoaxes, but each item had one thing in common. They were marked with the same curved horn symbol. Black spray paint, identical curvature, identical pressure. The final package Julio received was different. It contained a burnt Polaroid photograph. In the image, 5 boys standing shoulder to shoulder in their jerseys, but not on the football field. Behind them, rough stone, a cave wall, their expressions unreadable, except for Travis Kane, who looked directly into the camera. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open, like he'd just seen something behind the photographer. Julio sent the photo to the state police. It was lost in processing. No record of it remains. In the following years, the area near Widow's Cut gained a reputation. Strange noises, missing pets. Once, a group of teenagers dared each other to walk the woods at night. One came back bloodied, incoherent, repeating a single phrase, "The horns, the horns, the horns." He was hospitalized and never spoke again. By 2013, a local hiking trail was permanently closed. The reason? Soil instability. Unofficially, there were reports of sinkholes near the old storm drains. Deep, unnatural holes lined with scratches, not from machinery, but from something clawing its way out. Still, without new evidence or witnesses, the case files gathered dust. Then came 2024. On a warm July morning, a hiker named Cole Brenner veered off a marked trail near Limestone Ridge, over 70 miles from Dayton Valley. He was looking for a shortcut back to his campsite when he noticed a break in the stone, hidden behind a curtain of vines. It wasn't a cave listed on any map, not one of the official spelunking zones. Inside, it was dry, too dry, the air stale, as if sealed for years. 10 minutes in, his flashlight beam caught something metallic. 5 medals, old, scratched, each engraved with a name. Hill, Ortega, Chen, Alvarez, Kane. They hung from something strange, not string, not rope. Sinew, raw, twisted, wet. Above them, the symbol again. Horns, spray-painted in fresh red, the paint still tacky, and beneath it one word, returned. Brenner radioed for help. He never made it out. July 2024. For the first time in 19 years, the case was officially reopened. The hiker, Cole Brenner, was never recovered. Search teams combed the Limestone Ridge cave system for weeks. All they found was his backpack, his flashlight, still on, and a torn scrap of a hiking map. The batteries had been scorched, like they'd overheated. The flashlight casing was warped, melted around the edges. Investigators couldn't explain it, but it was the metals that reignited everything. DNA tests confirmed the presence of human tissue on the sinew, some of it matching samples from the original 5 players. The materials were fresh, days old, as if they had only just been strung up. Impossible, said the forensics team. The boys were presumed dead nearly 2 decades ago, but the ligaments, the blood, recent. The cave was sealed off, quietly. No press, no cameras, no statements. But the rumors got out, fast. Online forums swarmed with conspiracy theories, satanic rituals, occult sports cults, black site experiments gone wrong. Detective Marla Raines, now long retired, was watching the news from a nursing home outside Pittsburgh when she saw the report. She hadn't looked at the case files in years. But that night, she opened her locked cabinet, pulled out her box of evidence, and stared again at the burnt Polaroid copy she'd secretly kept, the one Julio Alvarez sent her before it disappeared from official records. She zoomed in. Behind the boys, on the cave wall, something had always been there, etched faintly into the stone, almost invisible, the same symbol. Horns, a downward-pointing X. She never noticed it before. And just below it, a shadow, not cast by any of the boys, something taller, wider. The next morning, Raines made 2 calls. The first to a local journalist named Raina Moore, known for chasing unsolved cases with cult connections. The second to the Interpol contact who had once tried, and failed, to track the bus driver, Gregor Kravich. Raina met Raines that same day. Over coffee and a stack of yellowed folders, Raines told her everything. The symbol, the burned circle, the malfunctioning footage. And then she told her the part she had never put in the report. I followed Kravich after he left town, took personal leave. I found his old rental house in Vermont. He was gone, but something was off about the basement. Old stone walls, old symbols, and on one of them, a scorecard. She slid the photo across the table. Dayton versus Wolverines, 28-24. Beneath it 5 names, the same 5, crossed out in red, and next to them 5 new names, blank, empty placeholders, like a roster waiting to be filled. Raina was stunned. Why didn't you tell anyone? I couldn't prove anything, and back then nobody wanted to hear about devils in locker rooms. It was just a loss. 5 boys lost. The state needed it closed. Raina asked about the symbols, if anyone had ever decoded them. Raines hesitated. They aren't just symbols. They're invitations, openings. Something old, older than any sport. I don't think this was about the boys. I think this was about what played through them. That night, Raina began connecting dots. She tracked the original graffiti on the visiting team's bus from 2005. The paint was a specific shade of crimson, not commercially available in the U.S. at that time, but it matched a brand sold in a handful of Eastern European countries. Countries known for their folklore about cursed games, devilish competitions, and creatures who took wagers in blood. One particular legend stood out, the horned ref, a shadow figure said to appear when a game defies fate. When the outcome isn't meant to happen, he doesn't punish, he collects. And he always collects 5. She found 5 similar disappearances from the last 40 years, in Hungary, Serbia, rural France, and even South Africa. Always after a controversial win, always 5 players, always an outsider coach, a foreign driver, or a figure who vanished afterward. Always a cave, and always a return. Raina called Raines. We were wrong. It wasn't about who lost. Raines answered softly, already knowing. It was about who won. The deeper Raina Moore dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. 5 players, 1 controversial win, then disappearance, always with the same markers. The horned symbol, the burned field, the missing outsider who had been just close enough to orchestrate it all. Every time, the local authorities blamed weather, drugs, poor parenting. But across continents, Across decades, it was the same game and the same aftermath. She began calling it the collector's game. Raina compiled footage, folklore, and police records into a private dossier, never uploading it online. She feared it would vanish, just like everything else tied to this story. One name kept reappearing across case notes and archived interviews, sometimes under aliases, sometimes not. Gregor Kravik. She traced him back to a Serbian village known for stories of ancient curses surrounding their now-demolished stadium. Local legend told of an unseen judge who decided the fate of games, one who could be bribed not with money, but with something far more valuable: players. Kravik had been a youth coach there in the 1980s. After a scandal involving 3 missing boys, he disappeared from the country. No charges, no trial, just a hollow record and a string of jobs across Eastern Europe, eventually leading him to the U.S. and to Dayton Valley in 2005. And then nothing. Until now. Interpol flagged an offshore passport application made in 2021 from Montenegro. The photo was blurred, but the name on the form, G. Kravik. The listed destination was Alaska. Meanwhile, Detective Rains was studying her notes from the cave symbols and the scorecard, the names crossed out in red, the original 5. And now there were new names scribbled faintly beneath them, as if recently added: C. Brenner, the hiker; J. Alvarez, Julio's name, Miguel's father; R. Moore, herself, M. Rains, and one more, T. Kane. But that didn't make sense. Travis Kane was one of the 5 who vanished in 2005. Unless he wasn't one of the taken. Unless he was something else entirely. Raina pulled the original photo again, the cave Polaroid. Zoomed in. There, in the shadow behind Travis, a faint line, a blur. The more she enhanced it, the more it resembled a tether. Not a shadow behind him, a shadow coming from him. She froze. Could Travis have been left behind as a gatekeeper? She reached out to Julio Alvarez, whose behavior had grown erratic. He agreed to meet, but only at the base of the Limestone Ridge Trail, where the medals were found. He said he'd been seeing things, dreams, not nightmares, visions. Like old memories that don't belong to me, he said. Plays I never watched, voices I never met calling my name, and always a whistle in the dark. That night, Raina and Julio camped at the trailhead. At 3:17 a.m., Raina awoke to a low sound echoing from the mountain, like cleats scraping stone. She stepped out of her tent and saw 5 figures standing in the tree line, helmets on, jerseys torn, their bodies wrong, too tall, too thin, as if stretched, faces hidden in shadow, and in the center of them, one figure without a helmet. Travis Kane. He raised a whistle to his lips. Raina blacked out. When she came to, it was morning. Julio was gone. Only his phone remained, still recording. She pressed play. Wind, breathing. Then a voice, soft, familiar. He was traded, for overtime. She sent the footage to Rains. That afternoon, Rains disappeared from her home. No sign of forced entry. The security footage had been wiped, and that same night, Raina received a final text from a blocked number. No message, just an image. A scoreboard. Dayton, 28 Wolverines, 24. Rematch scheduled, 5 required. August 1st, 2024. 19 years and 10 months since the game that broke the world, at least for those who lived in it. Raina Moore stood at the mouth of the cave. The wind was silent. Her phone had no signal. But the image on the screen, the scoreboard texted from a blocked number, was burned into her mind. Rematch scheduled. 5 required. 4 were already gone. Cole Brenner, the hiker, Julio Alvarez, the father, Marla Rains, the detective, and herself, marked, named. The 5th, Travis Kane. He wasn't missing. Not really. He had stayed. The cave was deeper than she expected. The further she walked, the smoother the stone became, like it had been carved or worn down by thousands of feet running back and forth for generations. At the end of the tunnel, a chamber opened, and there it was. A field, not grass, not turf, a rectangle of stone with white lines etched into the ground, glowing faintly like veins. At each end stood a crooked goalpost made from bones, and waiting in the center, 5 figures, helmets on, jerseys ragged, faces masked in shadow. They stood like statues, until Reyna stepped over the etched sideline. Then a whistle blew. The sound wasn't loud, it wasn't shrill, it was final. The 5 began to move, slowly at first, then faster, not toward her, toward their marks. A game had begun. She didn't know the rules, but she knew one thing. She was not meant to win. Then she saw him, Travis Kane, standing at midfield, no helmet, no expression. His eyes were empty, not scared, not cruel, just hollow. And in his hands, the ball. Reyna stepped forward. She didn't run, didn't hide. "What is this?" she asked. Travis tilted his head, like he didn't understand the question. "They said you disappeared, that you died." He spoke, the first words in 19 years. "I didn't disappear. I was chosen." "For what?" His answer came with a slow, inevitable certainty. "To ref." He held up the whistle. The shadows behind him, the other 4 players, began circling the stone field. Reyna felt something vibrating in the walls, like a crowd that wasn't there, watching. "They made a deal," Travis continued. "They weren't supposed to win. The score was wrong. That win cost more than anyone knew." "Who are they?" Reyna asked. "The ones behind the horned mark?" He looked up, toward the ceiling of the cave. Etched in the stone above was the symbol, large, ancient. They don't play. They watch. They collect. Every time fate is defied, they take what's owed. Reyna stepped back. "You can end it," she said. "You don't have to keep this going." He looked down at the ball in his hands. "I'm not the one keeping score." The ground shook. One of the shadow players lunged, not at her, but at the cave wall, carving something with its clawed hands, a new scoreboard. Reyna realized the truth then. This wasn't about punishing the past. It was about restarting the cycle, a rematch, and new players meant new victims, unless someone refused to play. She turned, running toward the tunnel. The shadows gave chase. The field warped behind her, stretching the cave impossibly long. Her flashlight died. Her breath thinned. Then she reached the surface. Morning light. But the world didn't feel lighter. Back in her motel room, she found something tucked under the door. A Polaroid. New. Crisp. In it, 5 figures standing in the cave, helmets on. One of them, unmistakably, was her. In the center, Travis, still holding the ball. On the back of the photo, scrawled in the same crimson paint, "Next season begins soon." Epilogue. The cave at Limestone Ridge was quietly collapsed in September. Official reports cite seismic instability. Reyna Moore never published her findings, but on the dark web, pieces of her notes circulate. Images, symbols, whispers of a game that demands tribute. To this day, local teams from Dayton Valley High never play past the regular season. Superstition? Maybe. But in the stadium's trophy case, beside the old photos and faded jerseys, a new item was added in 2025. A ball, cracked, burned, and tied with a string of something too sinewy to be rope. No one remembers who put it there, but sometimes, when the halls are empty, the janitors say you can hear it. A whistle, blown from nowhere, calling for overtime.